Hi everyone, we're a group of scholars and educators who've come together for a recording for the Leveraging Languages for Learning website. The website's aim is to bring researchers and educators passionate about language learning across diverse contexts together. The vision of the website is to create a space for collaboration and connections between and among scholars and educators, a place where we can share our research and teaching, expertise, ideas, and learn from and inspire each other. And that's the aim of bringing this group of educators and scholars together today. So maybe we'll start with introductions. I'm Associate Professor Anne Keary from the Faculty of Education, Monash University, and predominantly I work in the early childhood and early years of schooling sector. I'll hand it over to Professor Ben Rampton.
Hello, I am, as it says, Ben Rampton, and I spend half my time doing sociolinguistics at King's College London, a quarter of my time doing a conversation club for adult ESOL learners, and a quarter of my time in Dermot's class, which I'll be joining at the end of this session. Pass it on, Jessie.
Well, thank you. I'm Jessie Sambell. I'm a secondary teacher at Blackburn English Language School, which is a language school for newly arrived students who've recently come to Australia, and they're in their first 6 to 12 months of arriving in Australia. And I've been there for about 10 years now.
Hi, I'm Dermot. I work for English for Action as an ESOL teacher and community organizer. English for Action is a educational charity that does participatory ESOL, so has a sort of political approach to developing language skills and the capacity to take action together on issues of social justice outside of the classroom. And I set that organization up getting on for 20 years ago. I also work for a community alliance called Citizens UK in our South London kind of chapter.
Okay, that's great. So let's learn a little bit about each other. How did you become what you are professionally in language education? Maybe we'll start with Ben.
Okay, well, I always wanted to be a teacher, while I was growing up, attracted by the long holidays, and I liked being with young people and stuff. And I did, when I left university, I became a school teacher, and I was in a teaching in a language center. Didn't work quite like the Blackburn center. Kids could stay and stay and stay and stay and stay, but didn't have the 1 year kind of limit. And I found myself in a situation where the number of kids arriving in the UK was going down, and the head of the centre thought, "Oh my goodness, this is a problem." So the head went round all the local schools and looked at kids and said, if they had a brown face and they couldn't read, then the head said, "Right, you've got to come to our centre." They ended up in my class, and these were kids who'd been born in the UK, spoke perfectly good English. They just couldn't read, and I thought, so this was a little bit of a problem. The class was okay in the end, but they didn't like being in this language centre, and it was, they were being segregated. The issue was that there were kind of theories and philosophies in education which justified this, that provided a justification for this. Theories of deceptive fluency, second, third stage fluency, the idea that these kids, if you look close enough, they can't do things. And I thought this is nonsense. But I couldn't just say it. I had to kind of get some academic hand. I had to study it. So I went and did an MA, and then carried on doing a PhD a PhD and kind of carried on after after that. All the time finding things that that weren't in the literature. I mean, white kids were using Punjabi and Caribbean Creole, and all sorts of things were happening that wasn't working its way through into the literature. And I stayed in the academy for quite a long time. Well, until I'm now, I'm quite well past retirement, but I've semi-retired. I work part-time in King's, and I'm now in the ideal position of being able to combine the kind of sociolinguistics that I went into from school teaching with the teaching that I started out in, and working with Dermot's organization, with Dermot, and finding that it's a fantastic kind of connection. And is at last I'm able to kind of do the practice that I've been able to theorize. But anyway, yeah. So I think that's kind of my story of how I came into the position where I am.
Okay, thanks, Ben. I might hand over to Jessie.
Yeah, sure. So I did an arts degree, as you do when you don't know what you want to do when you're young, and travelled for a bit. As part of my arts degree, was a major in linguistics and Japanese. And I went back to teacher education in my mid-20s. And when I was on placement, I had two very distinctly different placements. One was at a very similar school to me, but with a different demographic. So newly arrived students, mostly almost 100% refugee students with a lot of very interesting and very pretty difficult experiences that they had. And it was just a great place for me to teach. And then the other experience was at an all-girls school, teaching Japanese in Essendon, which is quite kind of well-off suburb. So the demographic was quite, a lot of privileged students there. And I just, from that, I was like, right, EAL it is. This is what I'm going to do. So I applied for a job at Blackburn English Language School, and I've been there since a graduate. It's now, I think, 11 years or so I've been there. And I took on my role as a curriculum coordinator about 6 years ago. And it's been a really great position to have, overseeing the curriculum and working with the leadership team to teach our students obviously English, but it's the education of that whole student and teaching them life skills and how to be citizens in Australia. And I really enjoy my role. So that's where I'm at now.
Nice.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Jessie.
good to meet you, Jessie. And I can tell you a little bit about my kind of journey to ESOL, and particularly English for Action. So yeah, I set the organization up sort of almost straight out of university. Um, I didn't have a clear idea of what I wanted to do at university. I was very, very political as a kind of younger person, but completely sort of alienated by sort of mainstream politics. My early sort of those political influences, I kind of came of age around the time of the Iraq War and the new Labour government in the UK, and um, their attempt to sort of triple tuition fees. And I was always involved in sort of education campaigning at university. So I guess I was looking for something that, my kind of, what did I want to do in terms of trying to make the world a fairer place, a more equal place. I grew up in London. In a particularly like diverse part of London, I think, like Tooting and Streatham. People in the 90s, people used to say Streatham was maybe the most linguistically diverse pocket of London. So always surrounded by people from all over the world, and lots of different languages. Maybe a little bit similar to the environment Ben describes, with all of that sort of linguistic mix and things being up for grabs. I um I also went to Argentina and taught EFL. Almost straight after school, I did one of these CELTA qualifications. But that was really as a kind of way of, could I earn a little bit of money and travel at the same time? So not, it wasn't career thinking, but actually I absolutely loved it. I felt really comfortable in a classroom, and even even that being wasn't what I wanted to do with my life. It was relatively privileged Argentinian adults in a sort of provincial part of Argentina, north of Buenos Aires, but I still loved it. And I loved the language learning experience, learning Spanish, as well as the language teaching experience. Went back to university, sort of, thinking I didn't really have a strong idea of what I wanted to do. Studied development studies, which is learning about international development and NGOs and the kind of politics and economics of sort of global inequality. But I came to a fairly strong conclusion that I didn't want to go and do development work abroad, which was a sort of political position really, and a kind of feeling a bit uncomfortable with how that world operated. And then I discovered something called community organizing, which was something that emerged in the States as a bit of a response to um, I don't know, the failure of some other like trade unionism potentially, the collapse of social democracy and trade unions as a result of neoliberalism, and then one approach, which is to kind of rather than organize workers at work, which is increasingly difficult and still is, organizing working class communities through their institutions they belong to, like faith organizations, schools, and trade unions, and coming together in a kind of place-based way of then holding politicians and big companies to account at a sort of city level. So I discovered that there was something in London that was along the same lines, and I got a job as a living wage organizer, so organizing workers who worked in the London hotel sector in order to fight for better paying conditions, but through this community organization. So rather than being on a picket line with trade unionists, you would maybe be with rabbis and churchgoers and primary school children and school head teachers, and asking the company leaders or the political leaders to do deals with you to raise the pay of the lowest paid workers in London. Those lowest paid workers in London's hotels, what they had in common was that they spoke English as an additional language and they were from all corners of the world. So I started an ESOL class for them as almost as an organizing tool. And little by little, I found that I kind of felt that that was a really useful and fruitful way to organize, and I still loved the teaching, and the political work I've always seen as a bit more of an obligation, and the teaching complete joy. And I went in the direction of the teaching, and we changed over the years, and we set up an organization called English for Action, and I still do both.
Okay, what an interesting career trajectory. So I started out as a kindergarten teacher many years ago, and one of my first positions was in New Zealand, working on a mobile kindergarten, which was set up for rural Maori families. And it was more like playgroup. We'd set up in the marae, in the shearers' quarters, in the school hall, and we'd visit the same centres every week. And that was a great introduction into early childhood education for me. And then I went travelling overseas. And when I came back, I came back through the Northern Territory, the very north of Australia, and I got a job at Bathurst Island, an Indigenous community. It was actually a Catholic mission in its earlier days, and it was a bilingual school. And I was the preschool teacher, and I worked with two local teachers. And the children in the preschool were speaking in their home language, the language of the community. And my role was to support the teachers in planning a program and to just introduce English through songs and rhymes and reading stories. But predominant language in the preschool was the community language. And then each year of school, as the children progressed, they would be introduced to more English in the English content in the curriculum. And in the preschool, it involved very much the community, and particularly the mothers and grandmothers would come along every day and be part of the early childhood education program. Then I moved across to Queensland, on the eastern side of Australia, and I worked on another community, Palm Island, for 3 years as an early years teacher. It was the first few years of schooling. And I was very much influenced by my professional learning on Bathurst Island, the bilingual program, which had a program concentrated language encounters. So in those days, we had no curriculum in the early years of schooling. So I took that concentrated language encounters approach to the community of Palm Island, where there was 40 different tribes had been sent there in the early 20th century, and there was amalgamation of languages and cultures, and a lot of Aboriginal English is taught. And so the children came to school with Aboriginal Englishes. So I took an approach of a bilingual education approach, where I accepted their Aboriginal English for storytelling, and I would introduce some standard Australian English, is what we called it in those days, for writing and reading and other literacy skills. Then I moved into early special education, and it became apparent to me that there was a number of, I was working in Indigenous communities as well as rural communities where there was a lot of cane growing and bananas being grown in far north Queensland. And it became apparent to me in these communities that there was a number of children being ascertained as intellectually impaired without language being taken into consideration, that they may have other languages as their home languages, and they were being assessed according to English as the dominant language. So I became very interested in that side of English as additional language. And then I moved back to Melbourne and got into higher education through doing further study, and have researched into that space, as well as looking at intergenerational family practices for languages learning and the choices that families are making for how they're going to raise their children with which languages. And that's a very fluid and complex and dynamic space. So, but I think the early times in the bilingual school really influenced where I went with how I viewed languages learning for young children. So we might move to the next question and ask Jessie and Dermot, as teachers, what do you get out of interacting with academics?
You want me to go first? Yeah. So I think the opportunities, is this not the opportunities question? We're looking at just what do we get out of it? It's always really thought-provoking, I think, because as a teacher, you're on the ground, you're like, what am I teaching for my next class? You know, you're really grounded in the practical application, but going to see presentations from academics, reading papers and so on, it kind of brings you back to the bigger picture of and the underlying theories of why you're doing something. And that really, I think, can make sure that you're just have that deeper understanding about why you might be doing something. And I think with a lot of the teachers that we have, maybe they're doing, you know, really great formative assessments, but they might not know exactly where the bigger picture sits, or within what framework do they sit, or how that connects to the theory. And so I think that working with academics can really it really pushes you to be a little bit, you know, more thoughtful in your planning processes and your assessment processes, and thinking about why you are, you know, choosing to do a certain activity in the class.
I think for me it's been really interesting and useful to blur the distinction a bit. So both ways actually. So I mean the academics that I've worked with the most are Ben and Melanie Cook at King's. But from the beginning, we've not felt that we were very much like, who were the academics and who were the teachers was kind of slightly less clear. So I've felt that I've had lots of opportunities to play the role of the academic. They asked me to co-write things. I can present my ideas in academic contexts like seminars and things like that. And I think that maybe progresses my own thinking about my practice as much as being a teacher and listening to academics or reading papers. It's that interaction of like being, forced to kind of write things and think things through as an academic. So I've not that they've done sort of formal training in that, but we've just learnt by doing. I've been involved in a couple of projects where we've been sort of teacher researchers. And Ben and Melanie have kind of come to my classrooms and helped with thinking about what questions we're asking. But then I've sat down with other teachers and worked through those questions in like post-lesson reflections, and then we've co-written articles together that have been really formative in terms of changing my teaching, but also because we do quite a lot of teacher training, it's really informed the teacher training that we then deliver for other teachers. So I've liked that slight blurring of the lines, and of course, as Ben described in his introduction, he's also in my classroom, and we've been co-teaching effectively since about 2019, maybe, and done a lot of that with other teacher academics, and I think that's been really useful.
I also add something there. It just prompted I forgot an experience when we were working closely with an academic around like planning a unit of work. And I think working together where you then have that direct input from the academic, and you're then thinking about the students and the cohort that you have, and kind of coming together and meeting in the middle has been some of the richest experiences. And working together, like bringing your strengths from both sides. And then, of course, like you said, as you often play that middle, or I play that middle role where you're then presenting again to your staff what has been learnt, and taking and making it or adjusting it or putting it into the context that you're then teaching at. So taking that big idea and you're kind of you're kind of bridging the gap there.
It's interesting also to think about how when researchers are reading or listening or reading between the lines of like how I describe classroom practices and maybe fitting that into other frameworks that are more theoretical. Maybe I try and do a little bit of that with my students as well, listening for what they're saying and trying to understand how that fits into my understanding of politics and pedagogy in a slightly similar way.
So Ben, how do you feel about an academic working with teachers?
Well, I mean, I've always thought, and maybe more with kids than with adults, I don't know, that school teachers get close to social change, social disruptions happening because kids don't pretend or they can't keep it. And, teachers are with kids for all day. And, the other kinds of professionals encounter people on their best behavior, but that doesn't happen in schools. And maybe you're in the kind of situation you're working in, Dermot, as well. You're closer to things as they're happening on the ground, and that's one thing that teachers hear things going on a long time before socio-academics pick up on them, sociolinguists pick up and do the study. So that's one thing that's really important. Also, it's nice talking to people whose thinking is so undisciplined and who are so full of, skeptical. And, you have to work quite hard to persuade people that this is really going to, what you're saying makes sense. Now, I'm being a bit, if you take offense with that, Dermot, no, but there's a way in which the lines along which people thinking in teaching aren't kind of organized in the way that they are with academics. And of course, ESOL classes, EAL, English teaching with adults or with kids is on the front line of migration politics, and has been for a very, very, very long time. And I think that's kind of important. That said, have I spent the last 40 years, is it 40? Yeah, well, not quite, but nearly. No, probably is. 40 years regretting that I didn't stay a school teacher for, that I left school teaching. Well, no, I don't, partly because you do lots of teaching at university. You're still a teacher, and that's fine. But also because the timescales, people, you have to do things quite fast when you're teaching. The planning times, a month, a term. In the academy, you can really, things often work on a really slow, long, you can take time to do things slow. And I that fits with my personality. I'm also kind of by nature, kind of a bit of a doubter and quite skeptical. And there's a way in which the difference between academic work, being at university, or the first thing, the highest value is skepticism and doubt. Whereas, if you're a school teacher, what you have to do is to stimulate, to stimulate. And I suppose I like the space that there is, for doubt and so forth. I mean, I also think there's another thing that both, it's interesting to hear what Anne's saying about, I can't remember exactly what point it was, but you talked about kids being miscategorized, and language wasn't being reckoned with. I think that there is a particular place for universities, if you're aware that the theories, the ideologies, the categorization systems are really problematic, then that is a place, universities are a place where you can start to be listened to. When if you've got a degree and you've studied it, then people have to listen to you if you're an academic and you're criticizing the categorization system. Whereas if you're a teacher, they think, oh, you're just being political or whatever. So there's a way in which being in the academy is a way of getting a bit more authority. And so I don't regret being an academic, but the conversations with get masses out of interactions with teachers, and having a lovely time, having a fantastic time. I spent all those years not interacting with people in the third sector like Dermot, and now that I can is wonderful. It's great. Though I've been upgraded to co-teaching. I didn't realize I was co-teaching in Dermot's class.
I'm just prepping you for 9:30, Ben, because I haven't got a plan.
Well, I think interacting with teachers keeps me grounded. I mean, I've only really been a recent academic in the last 10 years, but before that, I did a lot of study, my master's, my PhD, and so on while I was teaching. So I had contact with academics, but not in a collaborative space where they were sort of informing my teaching and coming in and viewing my teaching, which I would have liked more of, to have that discussion about classroom practice. But sometimes I found in schools there was a tension there about doing further study and about academics in university, in that they're not in the real world. And there was almost like a bit of a threat, because they were sometimes critical of policy and what was going on. So it's getting over that, I think. But as Ben said, as an academic, you do a lot of teaching. I enjoy hearing about the pre-service teachers and what they're doing in schools and what they're doing in the field. And I enjoy working with teachers to hear about current contexts. And I find the wheel goes around and around. You know, teaching approaches from the past have come back into the fore in current times.
That's more a question of being just older than being an academic. I
True.
find that too. Yeah, yeah. And it's a real challenge. Actually, it's a really interesting challenge, isn't it? Because things seem to come around again, but of course it's never the same because the context changed. And trying to figure out how to talk about it in a way that's tuned, not just to recycle the stuff that happened 30 years, the talk of 30 years ago, not just to recycle that, but to understand how to talk about these things that seem familiar, but that reckon with the changed environment. That's an interesting challenge. Yeah.
And I find, having worked in a range of socioeconomic and linguistically and culturally diverse settings, that I'm very at the forefront of my thinking is this notion of context-specific teaching. Whereas I find in current times it seems to be more one size fits all, which I find very frustrating. So maybe we'll move on to the next question. What do you think are the best ways of organising interactions between teachers and academics, which we've sort of talked about? Who'd like to start?
I'd like to add kind of what I said before a little bit, but I think the professional organisations that like VicTESOL that we have in Victoria has been probably one of the key drivers, I think, in building that bridge between teachers and then research or academics, and also sharing like best practice for TESOL. And so having opportunities through the organisation, but then also developing like Anne and I, we get to know each other because we were both in VicTESOL many years ago, and then having that friendship, I guess, and you can be in contact with each other a bit more. If I had a burning question I needed to ask, I could contact Anne, and she'd be able to help me get onto someone or find something. And so that's for me has been probably one of the biggest positive. What's the word? It's just like, it makes it all happen and allows people to come together through the professional organisation.
I think formal projects with some resource are vital. I think I don't know, it might be particularly my organisation, but I imagine it's quite ubiquitous among teachers in the public sector and in the third sector. But the freneticism of rushing around and lots of project work, that it can be very hard to prioritize the stuff that you're not directly accountable for. So if the collaborations with academics and the thinking a little bit about theory and attending seminars and doing little pieces of action research, if they're not really accountable, and you don't have to do them, and you don't have a little bit of time in your week that's maybe paid for you to sit down and do that work, I find it's really hard to do it. So we've always been quite dependent. My side, I think it's been different, Ben and Melanie's side, but my side, it's been important to have little formal projects. We got started with one of these where we got a like £5,000 grant from the British Council to do a project that we called Who's Integration back in 2012, and we did loads more work, all of us, than the project paid for, but just having those deadlines and that little bit of external accountability really pushed us to do the project, and I think that's been true of lots of the work that we've done together.
But the problem with funded projects is that the money runs out.
Yeah.
And it can just mean that, okay, great, that was nice while it lasted, but now things are back to what they were were before. I think, what Jessie's saying about friendships is also a really, really important thing to keep, so that the relationship keeps going. It's those low-key, long-term relationships, so that, the project is the relationship isn't initiated by the project funding. The friendship's ongoing. Say, let's see if we can get a bit of money for this and so forth. And it's that long-term relationship. I mean, I can't claim I haven't had those relationships, but my colleague Mel Cook has obviously. I mean, she's the chair, isn't she, of trustees of English for Action. She's been, you, Mel, Becky have been friends for a long time, and I've been working closely with Mel and could kind of coattail on her well embedded relationships, and that's been that's how I've kind of come in. I mean, I think there are other techniques. I mean, if we want to be a bit more micro, there are techniques I will talk about. But Anne, what about you first? Yeah.
I think, like Jessie, it was through the Professional Teachers Association, the Victorian Association of TESOL, which opened up so many networks for me with teachers from across the state of Victoria, internationally, with contacts with the Department of Education, and with the Independent Schools Association and Catholic Education as well. And those contacts have been going for years and years and years. And as people move around, we seem to be able to reach out to each other when we've got professional learning opportunities, or we meet at conferences again, or maybe we have a research project which we're looking to do in schools. And it has been through Vic TESOL that I have developed a lot of networks with academics and educators and volunteers in the field as well.
I mean, I think that's, I mean, that's important in the UK too. We've got associations like NALDIC, the National Association for Language Development in the curriculum, which my colleague Constant Lung's been very involved in, TECLA and other organisations which are important. But what about all the teachers that come on our courses, our MA courses? I mean, do they just put on an academic hat for a year or 2 years while they're on the course, and then they're back, they're gone? And so what about MA classes as a way of establishing links between academics and teachers?
Mm-hmm. Is that Master of Arts?
Yeah,
or and Masters of Education. Yeah, I haven't kept in contact so much with pre-service teachers who've become teachers. The occasional one or two through social media sites more, because I've taken them on international placement experiences. And so they might still be on a Facebook site with me. And I learn more about their personal lives and their family lives and where they've gone rather than their professional lives.
Yes. I mean,
which is nice. But
yeah.
I was going to say, sorry, in a school setting, I think it also comes down to the interest of the principal and how much support they have of the concept of working with academics or taking on extra projects, because that means there has to be class cover. Who pays for that? Is the school taking that on, or is that funded by someone? And then how is this going to benefit the other staff in the school? Is it related to exactly like our cohort? And so if you don't have endorsement or support from the next level up, I guess, in the school organisation, then there's less of these opportunities. And I was very fortunate that our principal said, hey, Jessie and Leah, my other colleague, we'd love you to do this with this academic and work together and collaborate. And we're like, oh, that's really exciting. Like, what an amazing opportunity. But then we were responsible to bring that back into the school. But without the principal's endorsement, it wouldn't have happened.
Mm.
So there's an element there as well to consider.
So Ben and Dermot, what do you think is happening in Australia as far as language teaching and learning?
I don't think I know anything about that.
Well, that's interesting in the first place. I mean, that's interesting in the first place. And I wonder why, whether that's, you know, indicative of, well, let me say that for a long time, my colleague Constant Leung was always talking about Australia. Australia was the kind of the model at the school level, and certainly, you know, when I was there just in the summer for 3 weeks, and I was really impressed compared with kind of what's happening, certainly in the school systems here, where, you know, there's no support for English as an additional language kids in school, hardly any state support for that. I was very impressed by your, you know, by the Blackburn School language. What's it called? Language school?
Yeah, Blackburn English Language School. Yeah.
Yeah, I was really impressed. You know, 1 year, complete all round. You know, art. I mean, cookery, art. When I was teaching, when I started out teaching, I was teaching cookery, art, everything. So it was really a kind of improvised, you know, it was not serious. Gosh, you know, people who are trained in cooking, these specialist cooking, teaching these specialist topics, teaching in this school. I thought it was amazing. Very, very impressed also by the 3 cross-curricular themes that you have. Sustainability, right? Aboriginal and Torres Island, Torres
people and
Strait
cultures.
Island. Yeah. But also Southeast Asia. You know, it did feel like it did not, when I was in Melbourne, it did not feel like Australia was an outpost of England. It did not feel like that one bit. And the fact that, you know, you learn Japanese at I mean, the whole kind of attention to the languages that people learn at school and beyond. Well, I thought it was great. I mean, so I can see why Constant was referring so much to what people are doing in Australia. But I was also told that, you know, academics can't go into schools. It's very hard for academics to go into schools and so forth. So I imagine it's not all as rosy as I saw it.
Yeah, no, we don't have really any academics coming into the school to do any action-based research. That's not really a thing. I'm not sure, Anne, if you have anything more to add to that, but not in my experience. It's the teachers go out and then come back with the ideas and then adapt. It's not the academics coming in, if that makes sense.
It's becoming more difficult. I think the Department of Education is feeling that they don't want more pressure put on teachers, especially in these times. And so it's very difficult to get ethics permission to conduct research in schools unless it very much aligns with Department of Education initiatives.
So it's not they don't want more pressure on schools. It's more maybe they don't want the hold of the department's regime to be lightened or weakened by alternative currents of thought. I don't know why I can say that. I'm a long way away. It's a it's a move. Is it a move to monopolize thinking in the school curriculum with a particular line? Academics seen as potentially kind of heterodox disruptors, or rather than pressure?
Well, we can leave that as an open-ended question. So, Jessie, what do you think of, or what are your views of what's happening in the UK? Do you have any in terms of language learning in schools?
Gosh, I'm trying to recall, like, when I was doing some study a few years ago, the papers that I read, most of them were based in America. So, but not really. No. When I think about it, you don't really know what's happening in a lot of countries, except we do know what's happening, or we kind of get a sense of what's happening in schools, where our students are from, because you can see the common traits in their education, like what they know, what they don't know, their education style, their learning style, their classroom behaviour. That's quite evident, but based on the students' behaviour. But in terms of connecting to the UK, no, not really, don't have any idea.
I guess I was very fortunate a couple of years ago to go to your the UK inaugural language coalition get together or meeting, and that really opened up my eyes to how people can come together, I guess, for political reasons, to form a coalition to advocate for language learning in schools. And academics whose work I'd read, I got to meet in person, which was quite amazing, and to hear a little bit about what they do in their everyday practice. So I don't know if Dermot and Ben, you'd like to share a little bit about the Language Coalition.
Yeah, I think it's not totally for sort of like overtly political purposes only. I think there is a thing of learning from each other, creating space for interesting discussions across the different sectors, as well as having some ambitions to do some political work together. But that's hard. It's hard to find a single or even a kind of menu of things that we're all going to go in on together, rather than through our kind of separate unions or associations or groups that we work with already.
I mean, I think the background is that since the 1990s, we have been offering young people a very, very thin diet. The curriculum's been very, very narrow. And, in 2023, it looked like there was going to be a change of government, and with that, new openings. And so, we just sent out some tentative feelers, and wow, got fantastic reaction from people in different sectors. Okay, the national curriculum may have been kind of thin, narrow, focused on monolingual standard language, but actually, the civil society doesn't necessarily, those aren't necessarily the values, the priorities of what's happening in civil society. And actually all round, I think a lot of people are aware of lots of families multilingualism. I mean, in a place like London, most kids have probably spent, well, I'm not talking scientific, I don't know the figures, but one has the impression that most kids will have spent some time on Saturday mornings at a comp supplementary school, learning, studying, the language of one of their parents or such. So there's a kind of popular feeling, a popular sense that multilingualism is normal. And whether you're teaching modern languages, or whether you're teaching ESOL, or whether you're teaching straight English, that. And so our coalition, which kind of enunciated we kind of spelt out some kind of foundational principles, recognize the richness of language in our lives, accept linguistic diversity, engage with social and cultural change. I mean, these were our kind of mottos, if you like. Not hard, not at all hard to get people coming together and say, yes, let's see what we can do together about that. And I think that as Dermot said, it may well be that actually affecting any kind of change is going to be done much better through the subject specific associations like NALDIC, like the TECLA, etc. But nevertheless, the experience of talking across different boundaries, across so people from adult education talk to people in schools, that itself was very kind of animating and energizing. And well, we'll see what happens. We haven't kind of set up an official committee even. We'll just see what happens, see where the energy goes.
And certainly through Vic TESOL, that's been a strength, is to bring early childhood and schools and adult sector together and to be able to have conversations across the sectors. So to finish up, where do you see yourself in language education in the future? Who'd like to respond to that?
I can go because I don't know. I'm not sure where I'll be. Yeah, I think things might present themselves, but at the moment, continuing to review and improve on our curriculum and our pedagogy in the classroom, working with the staff to do that. Just always, it's a constant improvement cycle. So you're always busy. So continuing on, but then who knows after that? I don't know.
Yeah, I think I would like always to be an ESOL teacher, and I've kind of stubbornly held on to my one class a week among the other responsibilities of kind of running an organization, which can be hard to keep hold of the practice, but I've always seen that as totally essential and part of who I am, and I would like to always be teaching adults English. But maybe doing a little bit more of the kind of thinking and writing at some stage, if things ever get slightly less frenetic. And training, I love training, so I'd probably do a teacher training to a external group maybe once every 3 months. But I could imagine rebalancing and doing a little bit less of the kind of community organizing and sort of institutional administration, and a little bit more of the thinking, writing, and training.
Well, I had a delightful. Go on, Ben.
No, you go first. You go first.
I had a delightful experience this morning. I met a woman through the community who has a 3-year-old, and she says, I go to a bush playgroup every Friday morning. So I said, oh, can I come along? And it was just beautiful. It was about 16 children from birth to 5 years with a playgroup convener and their families, mainly mothers. And it was just a very natural bush environment. And the kids were making mud cakes and bird's nests from natural materials. And there were all sorts of activities. And they were learning about snakes. Stop, snake, walk away. And they went for a little bushwalk and they had little pairs of binoculars and they were listening to the birds singing and looking at the ants. And they went into a little tree which had a hollow in it and had a look around. And I thought, I'd just like to hang out here more and listen to the children talking and developing their language skills. and being in family groups in this natural, very rich environment.
Gosh, that's a very evocative story, and of course, the point is that one can, one can go on. I mean, as I say, I'm very old and past retirement, but there are quite a lot of us. There are quite a lot of people who are no longer fully, completely active. But that doesn't mean to say we can be useful. We can be useful because one of the things we do have is more time than younger people, which is, it's a terrible thing, and you feel guilty, and you have to be, if you can be useful, but you have to do two things. First of all, you have to make sure that you're not past your sell-by date, which can happen. But more important, or at the same time, you need to listen and make sure that you're not banging on. I'm not banging on about the same things that I was banging on in the 90s, okay, which is possible that you can do if you're older, saying the same thing again and again. So for the time that I've got left, I would like to just use my time and position, because King's College, famous institution, use my time to help to make connections, and lend a hand in the hard times ahead. But that depends. But depending on the willingness of Dermot and people like Jessie, Dermot, and others to have old geezers like see, he's already being distracted by something else because I'm droning on too long. To have in their class. See, I can't talk for more about 2 minutes and he's distracted. Go.
It's not even. Wait till you try and teach students. It's like 3 seconds.
No, exactly. Yeah.
Breakfast is starting to emerge in my house at this time of the morning, so being surrounded by sounds now, hence the distraction.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for this conversation, and I hope that whoever's listening, viewing this recording, may dip in and out of it, and it might be of interest to them, and that you might have conversations as well with colleagues and scholars and educators, whether it's at a local level, whether it's at a national level or an international level, because I think it's really important that we keep talking.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. I'll stop the recording.